Rules of Golf is produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for thegolfdirector.com. I'm Martin Woodhouse. I think so. And today we're going to continue on with rules 20 through 25. The last couple of weeks we've been talking about some of the relief situations that we come across, that situations basically where you can get free relief and things that we don't have to deal with on the golf course. We looked at rules 23, 4 and 5, or 23 and 24 in more detail. And just to remind you, 23 is loose impediments. So these are natural things that are not fixed or growing, things that we can move away that are not really considered part of the game. And then we have 24 and 25. 24 is obstructions, which we covered in some depth the last time. These are artificial things that we can move out of the way if they're movable, and if we can't move them, we get to move the ball out of the way for free. And then 25 we didn't really get into too much, but it's very similar to 24. There's abnormal ground conditions, things like casual water and those types of things, which are not ordinarily on the golf course things, again, we don't have to deal with, so we get relief in pretty much the same way as obstructions. Maybe we'll come back and revisit those. What I wanted to get into today is how we then proceed once we've encountered those situations, and that's covered by Rule 20. It is a big rule. There are 7 parts to it. I'm not sure if we're going to get through them all today, but there's quite a lot of detail in there, and it's very precisely worded, and the reason for that is we're bumping up against one of the principles we've been talking about, the Tufts principles. One of the two great principles are you play your ball, play the course as you find it, play the ball as it lies, and the other big one, or the great principle as Tufts calls it, is we don't touch our golf ball from the time we tee it up to the time we take it out of the hole. But as we all know, there are times when we do get our hands on the golf ball during the play of the hole, and a lot of those times are as a result of running into rules 24 and 25, where we're going to be picking up the ball and moving it. So because it's a principle, it's very precisely worded, and there's very strict procedures about doing that, because we are kind of not violating a principle, but we are dealing with that principle. And that's Rule 20, sometimes referred to as the kick-in rule, because it is a rule that kicks in when something else has happened. And as I said, there's no number of times, obviously, I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples where you're actually getting your hands on the golf ball. So this is Rule 20. As I said, there are 7 parts to it, so we'll start with 20-1. This subsection is called lifting and marking. A ball to be lifted under the rules may be lifted by the player, his partner, or another person authorized by the player. So you can authorize somebody to lift your ball for you, and in any such case, the player is responsible for any breach of the rules. So you don't lose your responsibility as a player if you authorize someone else to mark your ball. For example, you may hit a shot out of a fairway bunker, or a greenside bunker rather, hit it close to the hole, and to where it's required to be marked. You can have somebody mark that for you rather than taking the time to go and mark it yourself. So we'll come to replacing the ball in just a second. That's the next part. So that's marking the ball. The position of the ball must be marked before it is lifted under a rule that requires it to be replaced. We'll come on to marking, how to mark it, and what you can do to mark the ball and so forth in just a second. But the point is, of course, if we're going to have to replace the ball in the precise location it was, we need to mark it accurately. You'll notice that it doesn't say the ball has to be marked if it doesn't have to be replaced. For example, we were talking about last time, taking relief from a cart path. It's wise to mark the position of your ball so we have a point of reference, so we know where it was, but it is not required. You don't have to mark the position of the ball if you're not going to be putting it back in the same place. So if you're taking a drop off a cart path, you watch TV and they go through all the procedure and do everything strictly by the book, although it is not required to do that. So that's marking the ball if it must be replaced. And if it is not replaced, the player incurs the general penalty. The general penalty being 2 strokes in stroke play or loss of hole in match play, but there is no additional penalty under Rule 20-1. So if you don't put it back in the same place, there is the general penalty. Now, if a ball or ball marker is accidentally moved in the process of lifting the ball under a rule or marking its position, the ball or ball marker must be replaced. There is no penalty, provided the movement of the ball or the ball marker is directly attributable to the specific act of marking the position of or lifting the ball. And that again is something, that little phrase there, the specific act, we've come across before, and it really does mean the specific act. So if you're marking your ball and you put the marker down, and as you put the marker, you nudge the golf ball so it moves its position before you've got the mark down, there's no penalty for that, because that's an example of an act which is specific to that.
If you
act.
booted it with your foot, that's different.
Yes, that's not considered, or
Yeah.
if you drop your putter on it,
Yeah.
or something like that, or drop the flagstick and move the ball that way. But it has to be specific. And as I said, it's very strict because we're dealing with the principle. Now there are, as I always tell you, read to the bottom of the rules. Always a couple of exceptions and notes and so on. So the exception here, if a player incurs a penalty for for failing to act in accordance with Rule 5.3 or 12.2, there is no additional penalty under 20-1. So 5.3 and 2.2. 5.3 is a rule. Rule 5 deals with the golf ball. That's the name of the rule. 5.3 is one that rarely comes into play these days, although I'm sure, Jeff, you remember back in the old days it was not uncommon for your ball to become unfit for play. That's the name of the rule, 5-3.
Yeah.
So if the ball gets cracked or out of shape or creased or damaged in some way during the play of the hole, you can substitute that ball. But with the modern-day golf balls, it's rare that a ball is going to get cut or damaged in the course of play. I can't remember the last time that occurred. Probably, playing Balata balls.
Balata balls, yeah.
Sure. That used to happen all the time. In fact, I can't remember. I obviously remember playing. It would be very, very rare to play an 18 holes with the same golf ball, because it would very easily get knocked out of shape or just creased a little bit. You catch it a little bit thin, but that's so rare that I don't know for sure. But I think that rule may go away at some point. And 12.2 is the other one, and that is identifying your golf ball. 12 is searching for and identifying the ball. 12-2 is identifying the ball. So you do have the right to mark and lift the golf ball to make sure it's yours, and that's the rules they're referring to. So that was the exception. And then the note is the position of a ball to be lifted. Now, this is where, again, we've got to be very careful of our language here. It's when we're reading. Not only must we be sure of our definitions, but also the specific meanings of the words. The position of the ball to be lifted should be marked. When we see the word should, it means it's a recommendation. It is not required, but it's recommended. For example, you should put an identifying mark on your golf ball. It's Rule 6-5. It's a very smart thing to do, but there's no penalty if you don't. On the other hand, when we see the word must, which they changed, by the way, it used to be shall, which is a more archaic word, I suppose. When we see the word must, now what the word must means in the rules is if we fail to do that, we're dealing with, there's going to be a penalty involved.
Now let's back up to the previous of those 3 exceptions there.
Yes.
The one where you were marking your ball for identification, does it say you must?
Yeah, absolutely.
You must mark a ball that you're going to lift to identify.
Anytime you're going to be putting the ball back in the same place,
Yep.
which you would,
You must mark it.
you must mark it
Okay.
for identification.
That
That's
helps a little bit to
12-2.
say that too. That if it's going back in the same place,
Yes.
that's clarifies
Yeah.
it a little bit.
And and what it says is it recommends, this is the word should, to place a ball marker, a small coin, or other similar object immediately behind the ball. That's the recommended way. Now that tells us we can do it a different way if we want to. There's no penalty, but this is the proper way to do it. So you see these big old poker chips that people use. People mark the ball to the front, to the side. People sometimes will mark the ball with the toe of the putter and lift it. And those are all okay. They're all acceptable, but they're not recommended. So marking the ball behind is a recommendation. There's no penalty if you mark it in front or to the side or any of those things. If you're going to be moving your golf ball on the green, for example, if it's in someone's line, the proper procedure is to mark it as recommended here, then take the putter head and move the marker putter head to the side, perpendicular to the line of play, or line of putt rather. You can put the toe of the putter against the golf ball and put a mark at the heel of the putter. That's okay, but not recommended. That was one of the few rules. There weren't many, and they've gradually gone away over the years. That was one rule that was a little different for USGA and R&A. USGA have always permitted you to do that. Put the toe of the putter against the ball and mark the heel. R&A, that was not a proper procedure under the R&A rules. You had to mark it, then move the mark, which is more accurate. But that difference went away. So
now
you can still do that.
In other instances on the green, and we started this conversation talking about marking a ball that's got to be lifted to be identified.
Yes.
In that case, but other situations on the green, marking the ball behind it, is that a must?
No, that's a should.
That's a should as well.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I think most people do that, and if you see people doing something different, a lot of times people say, "Well, that's not right. You can't do that." You can.
Yeah.
You can.
It's not recommended, but it's
not recommended. The key is to mark the ball with sufficient accuracy to be able to replace it in the exact position.
Huh. Very good.
That's the key with marking it.
Yeah.
How you mark it is up to you, and the recommended way is as we've said. So that's 20-1, and that's lifting and marking. Then we come to 20-2, which is dropping and redropping. Of course, as I said, there's many situations where we're going to be dropping a golf ball, and sometimes the drop is not good for one reason or another, and we have to redrop it. There are actually 7 situations where you will redrop the golf ball, and we'll come to those. So with dropping and replacing, the first part, dropping and redropping, the first part is who can do that. And what it says is a ball to be dropped under the rules must be dropped by the player himself. You can have somebody mark a ball and lift it for you, but you can't have anybody drop the golf ball for you. The player himself must do that. The partner or caddy or anybody else cannot do that. And this is another thing as well. There is a proper way to drop a golf ball, and we see people doing this wrong all the time. The proper procedure, and this is a must, so there is a penalty attached. He must stand erect, hold the ball at shoulder height and arm's length, and drop it. And we see people violating that rule all the time. They're either not standing up straight, the arm is not fully extended, and it's very common to see people having the arm above their shoulder.
Yep.
I think a lot of people think that they're kind of being on the safe side. It's at least shoulder height. It is not at least shoulder height. It is shoulder height. So lifting your hand above your head to drop the golf ball is an improper procedure.
That's probably the most common.
I would think so. Yeah, and you get people just tossing it on the ground and that type of thing. But that is the proper procedure. And if you don't, and there is a penalty if you don't correct that, which is part of Rule 20 as well, which we may or may not get to today. It's 20-6. That is we call that one the eraser rule, and it gives you an opportunity to fix any mistake you may have made before you hit your shot. So if you've dropped it incorrectly, and somebody says, "No, that was not a proper drop, you need to do that again," you do that again with no penalty under 20-6. So that's the eraser rule. If you've already hit the ball, of course, then it's too late to to fix that.
Can I stop you there and ask a question?
Sure,
I will.
absolutely. Sure.
All right. So let's say I've made an
I
improper
can't
drop.
believe you haven't asked me one so far.
If I've made an improper drop
Yes.
and no one said anything, no
Mhm.
one said that's an improper drop, you need to do it again,
Right.
and I hit the ball,
Mhm.
and then the fellow competitor says, okay, that's a penalty because
Yeah.
you didn't take a proper drop.
That's a one-stroke penalty.
That's a one-stroke penalty.
Yeah. Procedural violations are generally a one-stroke penalty. And again, we'll come back to the principle of the penalty structure, which we've discussed.
Uh-huh.
What is the potential for advantage for dropping the ball incorrectly? Not very much.
Yep.
One stroke will cover it. So it's a one-stroke
Yeah,
penalty.
it's interesting. It leaves the opportunity there for the playing competitor to give you a chance or to take advantage of your
Well, I don't. I think most golfers are pretty good about avoiding penalties for fellow competitors. I mean, if you see a fellow competitor tee it up in front of the tee markers inadvertently, I would hope that you're going to draw his attention to that. Say, oh, hang on a second, you need to get that back behind the tee markers, rather than allowing him to hit it. Then tell him, and by the way, that's a two-stroke penalty.
Yeah. I've played with some people I'd rather wait.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, sure.
But
And
most you're correct.
yeah, I think most golfers
Yeah.
would be that way. You expect somebody to help you out in that way. And that's not advice, incidentally. Information on the rules is not advice, so you're not getting into any trouble with the rules by telling a player, hey, you're dropping that in the wrong place or in the wrong way, or
Yeah.
you need to redrop that. You're not giving him advice. Information on the rules is not considered advice, so you're not going to get in trouble for that one.
Okay. Very good.
So, where were we? Oh, we're up to part
Yep.
2, weren't we?
Yeah, we
So
just went through those three
We're doing
exceptions.
the
Yeah.
dropping, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if the ball is dropped by any other person or in any other manner, and the error is not corrected, as provided by 20-6, the player incurs the one-stroke penalty, and that's in match play and stroke play too. The general penalty in stroke play is 2. The general penalty in match play is loss of hole, but there are some one-stroke penalties as well, and they apply in match play and stroke play as well. So there are some one-stroke penalties in match play. There are no two-stroke penalties in match play. Now, if the ball, when dropped, touches any person or the equipment of any player before or after it strikes a part of the course and before it comes to rest, the ball must be redropped without penalty. And on this one, we always, I think most golfers are familiar with the idea of placing it after 2 attempts.
Right.
You drop it twice. This is not one of those. There is no limit to the number of times a ball must be redropped in these circumstances. It's not really considered a redrop. It was an incorrect drop. It was as if it never happened. It wasn't a proper drop. So if you drop the ball and it rolls and hits your foot, do it again. If it does the same thing again, do it again, and keep doing it until you get it right. Or equipment of the player. If we're dealing with measuring a prescribed area, club length, for example, or 2 club lengths, we leave our driver on the ground, or whatever club we've used to measure with, and the ball strikes that club, that drop is no good. We're going to cancel that, and we're going to do it over. And by the way, a tee in these circumstances is not equipment. If you've got a tee in your pocket, by definition, it's equipment. The exception is when it's used to mark the extent of a drop area or something like that. It is not equipment at that point. In other words, if you stick a tee in the ground and the ball hits that tee after the drop, it's all good. It's okay. It's just simply an obstruction at that point. It's not. It's not
Okay.
equipment. So
Yeah.
you would not redrop that one. That's good. Now, as I say, there are 7 occasions when you're going to redrop a golf ball, and again, this is one I'm sure that many people don't do right. They think they have to redrop when they don't. They don't redrop when they should. So here are the occasions when you have to redrop, and this is again a must. So a dropped ball must be redropped, and there is no penalty, of course, if it, number 1, rolls and comes to rest in a hazard. A hazard, of course, being a water hazard or a bunker. So if you're dropping through the green, the ball rolls into a bunker, you redrop it. Number 2, if it rolls out of and comes to rest outside of a hazard. Some occasions you are going to be dropping in a hazard, in a bunker perhaps, where you've taking relief from casual water maybe, something like that, and the ball rolls out of the hazard, then you've got to redrop that because you've got to stay in the hazard. Number 3 is if the ball rolls and comes to rest on a putting green. So you're taking relief from a sprinkler head close to the green. It strikes the part of the course through the green, rolls onto the green. That one has to be redropped also. Out of bounds, of course. If you're dropping a ball and it rolls out of bounds, we're going to have to redrop that one. And then number 5 is if it rolls and comes to rest in a position where there is interference by the condition from which relief was taken under Rule 24, obstructions, Rule 25, abnormal ground conditions, and 25.3, a wrong putting green, or a local rule, or it rolls back into the pitch mark from which it was lifted under 25-2. We'll just cover that one real quick as well. The embedded ball rule is 25-2, and that tells us that we are entitled to a free drop from a ball that's embedded in its own pitch mark in closely mown areas through the green, which through the green is the whole area of the course except hazards, putting green, and teeing ground of the hole being played, cut to fairway height or less. So you're going to get relief for that. Now, having said that, there is a local rule in effect in pretty much all competition these days, and that allows relief from embedded ball through the green without the closely mown part. So that would be in the rough also.
Huh.
But that is a local rule, and unless it's on the rule sheet, you don't get a free drop for an embedded ball in the rough. So the relief from that, again, this is one that people get wrong all the time. When you're taking a drop from an embedded ball, number 1, you can clean the ball. You don't need to mark its position because we're not going to put it back in the same place, and you drop it as near as possible to where it was embedded. It's not a club length. It's not a club length. It's as near as possible, and that would be considered. I've heard this said by rules officials about a span of a hand, about 6-8 inches, something like that. That would be considered as near as possible. The other thing about the embedded ball as well is you must not repair the ball mark before dropping the ball, or after it if it's going to affect your intended area of swing or line of play. So you do not fix that mark, even though you're going to be dropping as near as possible. The reason for that, we covered under Rule 13. You'd be improving the area of intended drop.
Now, as close as possible, the
Yes.
width of a hand or whatever,
Yeah.
does that have to do with where the ball lands on the drop or where it comes to rest?
Where it first strikes a part of the course.
So if I, in a rare situation, I'm maybe not that rare, but I'm near the green,
Mm-hmm.
slopes downward, I drop the ball and it rolls closer to the green,
Mm-hmm.
closer to the hole.
We haven't got to that one.
Ah,
We're coming to that.
okay.
Always thinking ahead.
All right, sorry.
So, no, you're fine. You're fine. So, this is number 5 on the redrop deal. If it goes back into the condition you're taking relief from. So, if
Yeah.
you're taking relief from casual water, you find the nearest point of relief, you drop the ball, and it rolls back into the casual water, or it rolls into a position where you're still standing in the casual water, perhaps.
Yeah.
In other words, where there's interference, you must redrop that. Again, you have to take complete relief from
Yeah.
all interference. So if you drop it, your ball's on a cart path, you drop it off a cart path, and you drop it into a position which satisfies the requirements of where it comes to rest, except for the fact that your foot is still on the cart path, that is not a good drop.
Yeah.
You need to redrop that one because you have to take complete relief. So that was number 5. Number 6 is rolls and comes to rest more than 2 club lengths from where it first struck a part of the course. That's, again, so a lot of people are going to redrop a golf ball when they shouldn't, because using the cart path for the example, we find our nearest point of relief. We don't have interference. We measure our club length, and the ball must first strike a part of the course within that club length.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people believe that it has to come to rest within that club length. That is not true. It can roll outside of that club length up to another 2 club lengths. So in theory, you might wind up almost 3 club lengths from the cart path.
Wow.
Or from your nearest point of
Yeah.
relief. So it's good to know these things because, you have a little bit of room there to drop, and sometimes it may be prudent to drop right at the nearest point of relief. It may be better to drop a club length aside or a club length further back, and you might even try and drop it on a little bit of a slope to where it might roll away another club
Right,
length.
yeah.
So you can be sure that tour players are aware of this, and they practice that.
Huh.
They'll practice dropping the ball the way they want it to go. So it's using the rules to your advantage. So the ball can roll up to 2 club lengths from where it first strikes a part of the course. So that was number 6. And the last one, of course, is nearer the hole. Nearer the hole, again, the principle of advancing our golf
Right.
ball by making strokes at it. So what does that mean? Nearer the hole than what? Well, it means A, its original position or estimated position, unless otherwise permitted by the rules, or B, the nearest point of relief, which we just talked about, or maximum available relief, which would be in a bunker, or C, the point where the original ball last crossed the margin of a water hazard or lateral water hazard. So those are the points for near the hole. So there are 7 times when you must redrop it. If you fail to do that, then you're going to be playing from a wrong place. So what happens if the ball rolls into one of those positions? Then we're going to redrop it. If the ball, when redropped, so now we're dropping it a second time,
Right.
rolls into one of the positions listed above, it must be placed as near as possible to the spot where it first struck a part of the course when redropped. So after the second drop, it strikes the course in the part of the course within the prescribed area. You're going to place it at that spot. And then the notes: if a ball, when dropped or redropped, comes to rest and subsequently moves, the ball is to be played as it lies, unless the provisions of any other rule apply. And note 2, if a ball to be redropped or placed under this rule is not immediately recoverable, another ball may be substituted. So if you drop one out of a water hazard, it rolls back in the hazard and into the water. There is no penalty for that. It can't be immediately recovered, so you may substitute a ball in those circumstances. And then there's a little note on the use of a drop zone, which is in the appendix. Just one, I'll just cover that real quickly, because there are a lot of drop zones out there, and I'm sure I've said this before. Many of them are there for the purpose of pace of play, and they're not really legal according to the rules of golf. On the wrong side of a water hazard, for example. So, in any case, some are legitimate, of course. If you are using a drop zone, there's a couple of other things to be aware of. The ball must first strike a part of the course within the drop zone, and the only time you're going to redrop a golf ball is if it rolls out of bounds into a hazard onto a putting green. Of course, that's already covered. Or if it rolls more than 2 club lengths from where it first came to struck the
Right.
part of the course. If it's close to the hole, it's in play. It can roll outside of the drop zone. A lot of people think the ball must remain in that white circle. That is not correct. It must first strike a part of the course within the white circle, but if it jumps out of that circle less than 2 club lengths, it is in play. You don't pick that up and redrop that. If you do that, you're going to be playing from a wrong place.
How about that? Wow.
A lot of people don't realize that
Yeah.
one. They think you've got to stay in the drop zone. You do not. So that covers 20-2. I think we've covered all of those. 20-3. This is placing and replacing, and that again is a pretty big rule, and we can probably spend a whole show on that one.
Yeah, we'll
So
save that one for the next one.
I'll save that for the next
yeah.
one. So as you can see, a lot of stuff going on in Rule 20,
Yeah.
and we've only covered the first two parts.
And I want to review a rule that you covered in a previous show because
Sure.
it came up since then, as this case always happens.
Right.
We talked about it just a little bit before the show, but in one of the previous shows, you talked about a rule that would cover a small child or something running off with a ball.
Mm-hmm.
And just this past week, someone playing at Barefoot came into the Callaway Performance Center to our one of our hosts, George Honeycutt, who was there, and asked him about a rule in which case the ball was rolling on the green when a dog ran onto the course and onto the green and snatched the ball and ran away with it before it stopped.
Yep.
And I said, that's funny because we just talked about something very similar, and I'd like to hear your decision on that, sir.
Well, not even a decision. It's the rule. It's Rule 19. Is a ball in motion stopped or deflected. That's 19-1, and that is an outside agency. The dog would be an
Right.
outside agency by definition. And what it says, if the movement is accidental, so if it strikes the dog and gets a deflection, that's what we call a rub of the green. That is a definition. It's a rub of the green. You simply play the ball from where it came to rest.
Right.
That will be a deflection, but it is different on the putting green. And this is 19-1B, and what it says is, if a player's ball in motion after a stroke on the putting green is deflected or stopped by or comes to rest in or on any moving or animate outside agency, a dog would certainly qualify under that definition, except a worm, insect, or the like, the stroke is cancelled. The stroke is cancelled. The ball must be replaced and replayed. And again, that is a must. You might have gotten a good deflection, it went in the hole, but it's not a rub of the green. Not a rub of the
So
green.
if the dog took the ball and ran away with it, you can replace the ball, but you've got to replay the shot.
The stroke is cancelled.
Stroke is canceled.
Yeah, the stroke is cancelled.
Huh.
Now, if the ball's at rest, that's a little bit different. That's
Yeah.
rule covered by Rule 18. Ball at rest is Rule 18. Ball in motion is Rule 19, and it's a little bit different on the putting green. And I think I did mention that when we were talking about Rule 23, loose impediments.
Uh-huh.
If a ball in motion is deflected by an animate or
Right.
outside agency, which would include loose impediments
Now-
that are in motion,
Now let's play.
that's the same thing.
Let's play this out just a little bit so there's no misunderstanding.
Okay.
In this same instance where the guy hit the putt and the ball came to rest, and then the dog came and got it and ran away with it. How
Okay.
does that differ?
Well, now we're at Rule 18, and we're simply going to put the ball back if
Or
we can get
As
it,
close to.
or substitute
Yeah.
substitute it as near as possible to the point where it was removed from. And generally, if we don't know a precise location, what we're going to do is drop the golf ball, the exception being on the putting green. In this case, we're not going to drop the ball. There are sometimes a couple of occasions where you do drop a ball on a putting green, which we'll cover later. But in this circumstance, you're going to place the ball at the estimated spot. If it was on the putting green, if it was not on the putting green, you would drop it, which is, interestingly, covered by Rule 20,
How about that?
which we're coming to, 20-3C.
Yeah, how about that? That is
Indeed.
so cool.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I got to go back and re-listen to the show. I'm not sure that the ruling George came up with matches that, so I got to get that fixed.
Okay. I don't want to get anybody in any trouble. Okay, so yeah, I guess we'll continue on with that last week because it is a big rule.
Yeah.
Okay, so TGD Radio and TV are produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for thegolfdirector.com. When visiting the Golf Director, navigate to our featured golf course pages where you'll find up-to-date information about course conditions, specials, and much more. If you need help with your next golf vacation, give us a call. 844-GO-GOLF-1, 844-464-6531. All of the TGD program is archived for listening and viewing on demand. To catch up on a show you may have missed, you can click on the TGD Radio or TGD TV tabs in the menu at thegolfdirector.com. Also now archived in YouTube.
Absolutely.
This is Martin Woodhouse. On behalf of all of us here at the Golf Director, we thank you for tuning in. There's more TGD golf news and information coming up next.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.